Now, there are a few companies that make smartphones, there are a few companies that make laptops and PC builds. There are very few companies that make both. Asus is one of them. And earlier this year, Asus turned heads when they launched the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1. It was one of the most popular budget phones released this year, but I think Asus felt like it was time for an upgrade. So here is the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M2, although they could have worked on the name. But the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M2 is here. Now, I've already put the unboxing and first impressions on the channel, so you can go ahead and check that in a card up here or a description below. Now, I have been extensively using this device for a few days, and I think it's time for a review. So hey, this is Sreehari from Mr. Phone, and this is the review of the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M2. So without any further ado, let's jump in. That's what I say always, but there's always something, and that's subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon right next to it. Now let's jump into the video. Now, while the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1 was pretty popular, the one problem that a lot of people had was that it was quite bland looking and wasn't really something that they could show off. The Zenfone Max Pro M2 is not that. It is definitely one of the best looking phones in the under 15,000 category, easily. The plastic back has been specially laminated to look like glass, and I have to say that it looks and feels premium in hand. That said, one of the things that Asus wasn't able to replicate from glass was the durability. I've been using the phone quite carefully, keeping the case on at all times, and still, somehow the back has managed to get scratches. They're not very visible, but yes, they are definitely there. The back is also a fingerprint magnet, and literally, and even between shoots, I had to carry a cloth with me to wipe it after every little shot. The buttons are very well built though, and very clicky. But I'm again not a fan of the glossy sides. Now, I've said this in a previous video that the ability to hold on or grip to a glossy or a matte back or a matte surface depends on the skin type. If the skin type is oily or dry, so it wouldn't really hurt to have some of both. So maybe the sides are matte and the back is glossy, or maybe the back is glossy and the sides are matte. Well, this certainly doesn't help that the sides and back are both glossy. Also, one other thing, if the sides and back both were matte, obviously there would be some gripping issues, but the one thing would be that you won't see scratches very easily. Here, the problem is that back is already scratched and the sides have also started scratching a little bit. So having an all glossy phone, almost every part of the phone slightly scratches over time. So that's the one problem that I had with an all glossy phone, which has a lot of plastic used. All that said, it does come with a case inside, and I strongly suggest you to use that. Too much talk about glossy. Let me tell you a few things I love. The fingerprint scanner is fast and accurate, and the placement is spot on. It has a headphone jack, a micro USB port, and a single speaker grill. The headphone jack is fine and sounds like any other, but the speakers are not my favorite. They have a tinier and thinner sound than I would have liked. A little more low end, it could have been good enough, but right now it's just too trebly, hence shallow sounding for me. Now we move on to the display, and this I like a lot. The Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1 already had one of my favorite panels on a budget phone last year, and this year it's even better. The colors just pop right out. The brightness isn't too shabby either. It sits at 500 nits. The resolution sits at Full HD Plus, which if it's enough for a OnePlus 60 or even higher a P20 Pro, then I guess it shouldn't be a problem here. This year's big thing is notch, and the story is pretty much the same here because that notch stands right out. I have my strong reservations about the notch, but for the people who like it, good stuff. Chin though is slightly bigger than I would have liked, and this one is not subjective. I understand that it's difficult to make a display with a notch and keep the chin small at this price, but looking at phones like the Realme 2 Pro, the Realme U1, and even the Honor 8X that launched earlier, and the kind of minimal chins they have been able to achieve is insane. And of course, there are phones from Motorola and other companies with big chins at this price, but Asus is a company that we expect innovation from, and it doesn't look like something they could not have achieved if they wanted to. That being said, the display itself is quite the panel with no visible color shifts or light bleeds. The color temperature is slightly cool, which I actually prefer, and there's also the option to go into settings and change the color temperature, so you don't have to worry about that. It also comes with Widevine L1 certification, which you people should be very happy about because popular phones like the Realme 2 Pro and the U1 do lack that Widevine L1 certification. Now, having it here means that you'll be able to enjoy your Netflix streaming in HD without breaking a sweat. The Asus Zenfone Max Pro M2 also comes with Gorilla Glass 6 protection, and this is something that not even a lot of flagships possess. So that is a great feature that you get with the Gorilla Glass 6 on the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M2. Now, coming to software, before I start fanboying over the stock Android experience that is here, I want to talk about the one problem that I have that should not have happened, but it's here. I hate notches, and that's a popular fact. But what I hate even more is a notch that isn't optimized well. First of all, there is no option to hide the notch, and whenever it does manage to do that, the top part has hard cuts while the bottom is curved, and that does annoy me to some extent. Another bigger problem is that bad optimization of the notch. The notch just cuts into most things, and it has been the bigger problem. There are other areas too, like when you have the standard screen on, the time and everything is well placed, and when you pull down the notification bar, the time just shifts to the top and gets cut. Now that said, these problems can be easily fixed with a software update, and I'm very confident that Asus will do that soon. Now, this is a company that has been taking product feedback very seriously for future phones and also for the phones that they have already released. So I have faith in the fact that Asus will fix these issues very soon. Apart from that, it's clean stock Android. There's not much to say apart from the fact that it is simply my favorite Android experience. It doesn't have the Android One branding, but I don't think that should be a problem. Let me know what you think about that, and if them moving to Android One program makes any difference, considering that you're already getting clear stock Android. It does not come with Android Pie out of the box. It does come with Android Oreo only, but I'm pretty sure that Asus is soon going to bring Android Pie to the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M2. Now, a lot of people, especially us reviewers, don't fancy long smartphone names because we have to say that in the video a lot, but this is Asus trying to make a point here. Now, in the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M2, the Max stands for big battery that we will go to in the end, but the Pro is what we are going to talk about now. The Asus Zenfone Max Pro M2 certainly justifies the Pro because it uses the Snapdragon 660. That's a substantial jump from the Snapdragon 636, and I'm glad that they made that choice. The Snapdragon 660 is a very capable processor, and while there are a few phones under 20,000 category that carry the same processor, I think we know how good the Snapdragon 660 is with stock Android. The everyday use is buttery smooth. The whole thing just flies. Now, my usage with the phone is pretty minimal in the sense that I mainly use it to make calls, WhatsApp, some Lite, social media, and that's it. I do spend a sizable amount of the time on Amazon Prime and YouTube. All of this is easily handled by the Snapdragon 660. Now, I don't play a lot of games, but I of course can't put out a review without testing the processor for general use cases. So I played PUBG on this thing and it was good. Now, the graphics were set to medium, and I obviously wasn't getting the insane graphics that I get on an iPhone or a Mate 20 Pro, but the gameplay, which is what it comes down to in the end, was absolutely smooth. I had fun playing the game. The device did get slightly hot, but that's how generally all devices get when you're putting too much pressure on it. Nothing too uncomfortable, and that was my experience with the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M2. Now, in all of our reviews, we do show you benchmark scores, but the one problem that we face with this one, for some odd reason, Antutu Benchmark and 3D Mark are both not supported on this phone somehow. So when we go to Play Store, it doesn't let us download those. So I can't give you scores for Antutu Benchmark and 3D Mark, but there is Geekbench score, and you can take a look at the score. So the Geekbench score of the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M2 is actually higher both on single core and multi-core compared to the Realme 2 Pro, which also carries the Snapdragon 660 as a matter of fact, when compared to the Honor 8X, which carries the Kirin 710 processor, while the single core score of the Honor 8X, which is the Kirin 710, is slightly higher. The multi-core score of the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M2 is higher. When compared to the much more powerful Helio P70, the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M2's Geekbench scores are still very comparable and very close to even the Helio P70. Coming to cameras, while I like the cameras on the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1, the one thing that did not go well with me was that you would have to get the more expensive RAM configuration to get the better camera performance. Fortunately, they decided not to do that this time, so I'm happy to tell you that even if you get the lowest end version, which starts at 12,999, you get the same camera optics that power the more expensive 6GB RAM version and the 4GB RAM version, of course. At the back sits a 13 megapixel sensor at f/1.8 aperture and a 1.25 micron pixel size. There's also a 5 megapixel secondary sensor. This camera is very capable, that's for sure, because when we go out and take pictures, they look quite good. The details are done very well, and the colors are Well, let me explain it to you. The colors on the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1 were very natural, so there were a lot of details and natural tones. Now that sounds cool on paper, but what we found out was that people generally gravitate towards slightly more saturated and processed look compared to a natural look. Now Asus has clearly worked on that. That said, there are situations where it takes natural colors. Now in my testing, what I've seen is that when there is one color dominating the picture, Asus tries to slightly process the picture and bring that color out. In some other cases though, where there are a lot more colors, Asus tries to stay slightly more natural in order to make sure that the processing does not go wrong. That said, in most situations, the pictures look pretty awesome. I have had fun looking at the pictures and analyzing them, and I think looking at these pictures, you can sense that too. Looking at human subjects and especially portrait mode pictures, Asus has done a great job here too, and you should be able to make the difference easily looking at these pictures. The details too are spot on. The low light is not the best I've seen, but the images do look pretty good. We'll do a camera comparison very soon, which will be a better comparison and analysis of the pictures, which will also give us and of course you a better analysis and perspective of how the camera stack up against the competition. The part that did not impress me though was the selfies, and I am heavily disappointed here. There is not one selfie out of this phone that I have liked. I've tried taking selfies in different lighting conditions and I have not had a good look on my face when I go back and look at them. Although let me tell you how it could be better. So all the pictures I tested out had great details. For example, the texture of the shirt or the jacket, the hair, everything preserved quite beautifully. But the face is my main problem here. The face has been simply smoothened to an extent and brightened up in a very uninspiring way. Now in this selfie, for example, with me and Vishal, who possess different face tones and skin tones, we look exactly same. That is a very unappealing way to beautify. There are slight exposure issues too, which I found with selfies. The colors are actually not too bad. So given that they work on the face and the exposure issues, I think Asus should be able to give you a good selfie experience if they decide to work on it. That's it for the pictures. Now this phone shoots up to 4K at 30 FPS. It has EIS at 1080p also. Now the video we took for now looked good and the audio also sounds quite fine, but I'd still suggest you to wait for the camera comparison to make sure that we get a credible perspective. Now, if you notice, I said that I had fun looking back at these images and analyzing them. I did not say that I had fun shooting them, and there is a small reason for that. And that is the camera app. The camera app is certainly improved, but it's still quite far from perfect. The layout of modes is still a hassle to switch between. Switching between photo and video mode is also very unintuitive. There are other things too. In the auto mode, for example, while it's possible to tap to focus, that doesn't work very well every time. Also, a simple option of controlling the exposure, something that most phones offer, and I never knew that I would miss it. I miss it here because it's not here. And whenever I'm especially trying to take low light shots or where light is not very even, this is a thing that I miss a lot. And also, while the shutter is quite fast, the placement of the shutter button feels slightly awkward. It's already off center, as you can see here, and also it should have been bigger in size. Now, even if it's off center or it's small, if I would not have had that problem when I was shooting the pictures, I would have been fine. But while shooting pictures, I would always miss a few times, and then I have to reshuffle my hand, look where the shutter actually is, and then get it right. That's why I have a problem with the placement and the size of it. So let's hope that Asus works on that too. Now we finally come to the max in the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M2, and that is the 5000 mAh battery inside. It was one of the most talked about features on the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1. That's why I won't talk a lot about it, because the battery life is still pretty insane. So of course the battery life is going to impress you, but what is maybe not going to impress you is the charging speeds. It's a 10-watt charger, it's a 5000 mAh battery, doesn't really go long, so it does take a long time to charge the phone from 0 to 100%, and it's fine. I guess the fact that even with 15% of charge you can actually go 3-4 hours without a problem, I think it's fine that the charging is slightly slow, although I would have liked the charging speeds to be a little bit faster. Now we finally come to the conclusion. Is the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M2 worth buying? Well, of course, this is a great phone. I don't think you have to ask me for that, because this is one of the most feature-packed budget phones this year. When you look at the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M1 last year, there were only a few things that were missing from the equation, and I think the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M2, they've worked on those things specifically and they've gotten it right. Now, the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M2 starts at 12,999, and let's look at some competitors. There's the Redmi Note 6 Pro, the Honor 8X, and the Realme 2 Pro. Now, these are the phones that I consider as its competitors. competition. Now when we talk about the Realme 2 Pro, it obviously has a display with a water drop notch. It's a much more sexier looking phone for a lot of people, if you will. But apart from that, I think the performance on this would be slightly better because this runs stock Android, and the skin on the Realme phone is slightly heavier compared to this. That way, when you look at everyday performance, I think you'll have a smoother experience on the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M2. Similar case with the Honor 8X, not as heavy as the Realme 2 Pro's UI, but it is still heavy. EMUI is still heavy. It runs a Kirin 710. Please let us know if you want us to do a comparison of the processors of a Snapdragon 660 versus the Kirin 710 versus maybe the Helio P70. Please let me know that in the comment section below. But I think even in the Honor 8X, what you have to consider is that yes, it uses glass and metal, so it's a slightly more premium device, and it also costs slightly more. If you want a glass and metal build, a better looking device all through and through, because that has glass and metal, of course, and even the screen has a smaller chin and a smaller notch too. So I think that is also a very good experience that you get in the Honor 8X. It's slightly higher in price, but that's also a good buy. When we come to the Redmi Note 6 Pro, MIUI is obviously heavier. The processor in there is the Snapdragon 636. Here you get the Snapdragon 660. So there is that difference too. So if you're looking for a phone with the best performance in this price range, I think the Snapdragon 660 running stock Android at the 12,999 price is a really good deal. Apart from that, you also get good cameras. I won't comment on the cameras compared to the Redmi Note 6 Pro or the Realme 2 Pro or even the Honor 8X. We'll do that after we do our comparison, which is also dropping very soon. So stay subscribed if you want to see that. But that's the whole gist of it. So if you want a phone with exceptional battery life, capable camera performance, clean stock Android, the Snapdragon 660 of course, and a phone that you can flaunt in front of your friends, I think the Asus Zenfone Max Pro M2 is going to be a very good choice. And looking at the starting price of 12,999, I think it's a great deal. So with that, we come to an end of this video. Please let me know any questions that you have in the comment section below. Any feedback, anything, let me know in the comment section below. But with that, we come to an end. Wait for the comparisons that are coming up very soon. Stay subscribed if you want to see that. So that's it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. This is Sreehari from Mr. Phone, and I'll catch you in the next one.